everyone. Welcome back to Leading the Frontline, sponsored by Legion. Thank you so much for being here for our second official episode. Hopefully you enjoyed the first one as much as I did. We've gotten some great feedback, which I love to see and hear. And just a reminder, too, if you haven't done so yet, please don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, whether you're listening or watching. As I had mentioned last time, you are for sure going to have an amazing time. And this episode, I have Nabil Malouli with me, and he is a recognized leader in the logistics and distribution centers industry. He's the SVP of Global E-commerce and returns at DHL, and he brings deep insight into scalable e-commerce solutions, automation, and customer-centric supply chains. Nabil, thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
I'm great. Great to see you, Traci. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yes, same here. And thank you so much. And I think it's really, really cool to actually reflect on your experience, which we'll get into. But I do want to let all of the listeners know, as a reminder, that we have some intro questions that we ask all of our guests here at Leading the Frontline. And so, Nabil, you are not exempt from these questions, unfortunately, but I think you'll have fun answering them. The first is, please tell us, what was your first hourly job ever?
My first hourly job was actually to be a waiter. So I've done actually many jobs when I was studying and my teenager years and then a bit later. So waiter was the first one.
Oh, cool. Well, I can only imagine the life lessons you learned while waiting on other people.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I still use a lot of the learnings from that experience, definitely every day. I think the customer centricity that I'm trying to apply in my business every single day, and also the way I build the culture in the organization around customer centricity, I think is highly influenced by that. But also, for anybody that has worked in the hospitality business, it's very similar to supply chain in terms of you need to be very resilient. And you need to be able to adapt to change, and you need to be able to be working long hours and be very dynamic. And I think that resiliency is also something that I use every single day.
Wow, that's amazing. And we'll probably come back to this because, there is this unique element that connects our first job to our current job, whether it's like the thing that inspired us to go into a particular career or industry, or as you mentioned, some characteristics or skills that we acquire along the way. So we'll definitely come back to that. And resilience, I think, is something that the better we are at possessing that, the easier our lives probably will be, especially our careers for sure, and certainly in an industry like supply chain. And so as we think about or kind of understand who you are, can you share a little bit more about your background and what led you to your current leadership role?
Yes, so I'm originally from France. I was born and raised in France from Moroccan parents. So my parents were immigrants in France. I studied in France until I was 20 years old. And then I decided to study abroad. And I studied abroad. I liked it. I started to work actually internationally. And the last 22 years, I've been living in different places. In China, in the US, in Mexico, in Brazil, in the UK. And I did a very weird, I would say, career change very early, but I studied in investment banking in a very large institutional bank, a French bank, and I didn't really like it. And I always liked international trade. So I had an opportunity to move into supply chain, actually at DHL. Where I started to work on international freight forwarding services, so air freight, sea freight, global transportation projects, and I really liked it. And then I found myself into this industry that is, for many people might seem not the most exciting industry, but it's the industry that moved the planet, right? And if you look at everything around you, wherever you are, 90 to 95% of the products will have been transported at some point internationally across, either the creation of the items or even as finished product. And so I started a maybe not like the usual career, because I think today not so many people stay that long in the company, but I've been working for the organization since 2007, so like almost
Wow.
18 years. And I started as an assistant manager And then I worked my way through resilience, hard work and results, different jobs. Of course, I did 8 jobs during this time. But I also moved across the organization in different areas of the business. And today I lead what is the contract logistic business, so all the warehousing and fulfillment operations for e-commerce, retail, and omnichannel clients, which is a global business. And it's one of the areas that has the highest growth and also complexity. And that's also an area of the business that is evolving very fast. That's why I love it.
That's amazing. And I love how you talked about this pivot in your career that you made, that you were in banking, investment banking, which, some people aspire to be in that their entire lives. And for you, you were like, yeah, this is just not for me. This is not where I feel most fulfilled. And I think what's really interesting about that story is that you were able to apply whatever skills you had or acquired from that experience to this new experience where you've been with DHL. And I did look at your LinkedIn before we started talking, and I noticed that you have this extensive experience at one particular organization, DHL, and you've had all of these opportunities for growth. And so when we think about or reflect on what you said initially around the idea of resilience and what that taught you and how you apply that today, I'm curious what other skills or even characteristics or traits or ideologies you've taken with you from the time that you were a waiter and serving others to now being a leader, and how that's maybe transitioned for you or how that's had an impact on your career.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of things, right? But I think if I reflect on what was really for me important, there are a couple of things. Number one, I chose very early on into my career to go in developing markets. I went to China in 2006. Obviously, today China is much more developed, much more mature than what it was at the time. But the fact of going to work in developing economies usually gives you more opportunities. Simple mechanics, right? I mean, things are moving faster. There is less people, there is less competition, there is more opportunities because companies are growing faster. So you just get more opportunities for the equivalent of work that you would be doing in a mature market, in a developed economy, or in a market that is going fast and growing fast. You will get more opportunities. So I think that was one choice. That was a very good choice, I think, early on, and it was on purpose. Then after Asia, I worked in Latin America, and I had the same, which allowed me to grow very fast in the organization in terms of what I was doing, my opportunities, and so on. The second thing is, I come from a very humble family, and I didn't have networks, I didn't have people to really rely on. But I learned very early that this was very important, and so I started to create, mentoring relationship with multiple people. I don't think mentoring, oftentimes people think about mentors as, the person that's going to help you your entire life and so on. I don't think at it that way at all. I think actually you need to have multiple mentors for different purpose, personal life, maybe relationships, maybe business career. I mean, there's different people that will inspire you from different perspectives. And I think you go to these people and you ask them advice, and you ask them if they would be willing to create that type of relationship. And usually people will say yes. Most of the people will say yes. I will argue if not everybody would say yes. If you go and you ask it in the right way, and it's genuinely advice. You're not selling anything. You're not trying to do, influence that person or anything like this. It's really just really advice. I think if you do it that way and do it well, not only you're going to get very good advice from people that you admire or that inspire you, which is amazing, but also you're going to get very good shortcuts as to how you do things in a way or the other, and on some of the difficult decisions, also to have somebody that maybe you can really be honest and say really what you're thinking and get, a second opinion on things. I think the other one is whenever you work in a company or in an area, I think you really have to think about how quickly is the space you working at or in is evolving. So, I took a bet in 2016 to, as some people say, well, it's not really a big bet. I agree with that. But in 2016, I realized that the transition from traditional commerce to online commerce was a big challenge for many companies. And I really thought, oh, this is, even the leading companies have challenges to go through that transition, which means everybody else also has the challenge. And so I was working on a project in the US for a large sports and apparel company. And based on that, I said, oh, you know what? I really like this. I'm just going to dedicate myself to that because I think there are going to be a sequence of opportunities that are going to come if I'm specializing in that space and I learn and I build knowledge in that space. I'm going to have a lot more opportunities than if I work in, maybe today, maybe the automotive industry, for example, which is way more stable. Even if you could argue there is things that are happening in the automotive industry today that also create some disruption, but the growth of the automotive industry is certainly not the same that we would have seen like 40 years ago or 50 years ago. A good example of this is today AI is at the center of everything, right? I mean, if you want an advice today and you're figuring out where you should be working, in businesses with probably an angle like that will give you a lot more opportunities in the coming years. If there is an AI component, whatever job you're doing or whatever career you're pursuing, if there is a component of that into it, I think it's going to be really helpful for your development. So I think these are a few things that definitely I think made a difference.
Yeah, it sounds like you've, especially when you were talking about the relationships that you've focused on and have built over the years, that you have in some capacity met some people or have, tapped the shoulder of some people who have really helped you to maybe just like open your mind to these opportunities in front of you. And obviously your achievement is your own. And certainly I do think that relationships play a huge role. Like to your point, mentorship doesn't have to be this lifetime long, arduous, extremely energy involved process. Like you can really simply say, hey, you're in this very interesting role that maybe I'd be interested in doing one day. Can you tell me about your day to day? Can you tell me about, what that looks like? And I can only imagine the reciprocal effects when someone ultimately, I agree with you, like is interested in helping someone else, because most of the time people are really willing to go out of their way to help others, that then there's a sense of fulfillment for them too. And so I'm curious, have you had people reach out to you, whether someone on your team or even outside of your company who's like, oh, Nabil has a really interesting job or a really interesting background. I want to learn more. Have you had that come up over the years?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I mentor many entrepreneurs myself. So I'm part of a high impact entrepreneur network called Endeavor. And I'll mentor, at least twice per month, entrepreneurs from everywhere, from South Africa to Chile to the US to Indonesia. I mean, across the globe, and with very different level of maturity in their journey. People that are older than me that have achieved amazing things already. That you could say, well, what can I really say to that person? They've already achieved so much. But sometimes people, they just want to have another perspective from somebody that's from another industry or have done a different path or just, knows some specific or technical or has specific or technical knowledge about an industry. And so these relationships, they are different. But yes, so I do that. And then, of course, across the EHL also, I do have all the time new joiners, not only in my team, but across the business that will ask me, hey, we've seen you've evolved, you've been in the company for so long. Why is that? How can we learn from that? You've moved across the different areas of the company. Why did you do that? And so I have this all the time. And not only new joiners, sometimes people just want to have a view from from somebody else that maybe they either respect or they think they can identify themselves with, and I'm certainly very happy to do it, and I do it very often as well.
That's amazing. And this idea of like having a community that you're a part of, I think that goes a long way. And when I think of even the concept that we're focused on here at Leading the Frontline, like, understanding the impact of so many industries and so many businesses on hourly employees, on employees who are at the center and the front line ultimately of kind of like the way the world works. Like one of the things that you had said, and I'm going to paraphrase probably pretty terribly here at the beginning, is that, this idea of trade and how, things are going from one place to another around the world. And like I said, I'm totally botching the verbiage that you used. But what it made me think about was how small our world has become because of industries like supply chain and just the way that we're so directly connected to countries that are 15, 20 hours away from us, depending on where we are in the world. And so I'm curious, when you think about your own team and even the teams of your teams, what are some of the things that inspire you to be a better leader or to lead the way that you do lead at DHL?
I think what inspires me is really, the improvement of things. And when I think about improvement, I'm talking about like personal development, as an example, of somebody that joins the team and maybe just starting their career or are very early in their career or even more advanced in their career, but maybe very knowledgeable in one area of the business and then are looking to expand. So I think personal development for me is something that I think you do not want to wake up and just do the same thing over and over. I don't think that's a good I don't think it's a good way of living. I think it's not the way I think about life. It's not the way I think about, how, you continue to get excited when you wake up and so on. So I'm a big promoter of continuous improvement. And again, not only in the context of business, but also in the context of personal development. So I take classes. I recommend always to my team members to also take courses outside of the company and so on, so they can continue to learn and develop. So I think this to me is the biggest, right? Like developing talent, having somebody in your team that gets promoted and becomes, a director, senior director, VP, change their life, improve their life, give them more opportunities. That's the most amazing thing, right? So I think that part is definitely like, I think central and is the most important in my view. And the second one is really to do the right things across the business. When you have large P&Ls or when you work in large businesses, you have actually a big impact around what you do can be meaningful. I mean, there are a lot of projects I work on or my team works on that are going to change the way maybe you buy, Traci, your favorite apparels. They could be cheaper. It could be a better, more sustainable way that company operates as a result of a project that we do with them. And I think, this is, maybe more on the day-to-day, but I think when I talk about like doing the right things is obviously all these projects we work on, because they are such a large scale and they are primarily with very large companies, they also make an impact around the world. On access to products, they make an impact on how sustainable a company can be. So I think it's very exciting as well.
That's amazing. And actually, one of the questions that I had for you was how your team makes an impact that's maybe different from other teams in similar industries. And it's really interesting, actually, to hear about the direct correlation between what your team does and how we as consumers are impacted. Is there anything else similar or dissimilar to that maybe sets you and your team apart from others?
I think the scale of the impact, I think, is the biggest thing, right? I mean, we are a global team. We can bring best practice from one country to the other. We can bring, sometimes we can leapfrog an entire business, like couple of years, because we will bring a knowledge or we will bring a technology that we've seen in a more mature market into. I think the biggest aspect is really that scale of the impact at the global level. I think that's the big differentiation.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I feel like I could, because I have so many questions, even just on some of the logistics elements of logistics, I feel like I could go on and on, but I want to stay focused too, because there's so much that I think about, even in relation to your team. And that is like, if I can articulate this the way that I'm saying it to myself in my mind, when your team like gets up every day, and maybe you have some understanding of this because of course you can't be in the heads of every single person that works for you. But when they get up during, in the beginning of the day and they are getting ready to go to work, what do you think drives them? Is there an element to this where they're like super passionate about the industry? Is it potentially the way that you lead? Like, what are some of the things that really motivate your team?
Yeah, I think obviously it's hard to respond. I think, but some of the things that I believe to be realities. I think putting the right environment for the team, where people are happy to go, where they work with people that they trust, where they feel they belong, is the basis of people waking up and being happy to work and go to work. If you don't have that, if you don't have a sense of belonging and you don't have a sense of trust with your peers, not only with your boss, but with your peers, with your boss, and with your team, I think the rest is really, really hard. I think the rest becomes really hard. As simple as that. So I spend quite a meaningful amount of time. I also use an external coach to help us as a team. That comes on a quarterly basis. It's part of my team meetings and so on. And that external coach is specialized in coaching teams in the context of athletes, in the context of sports. And I really like that because I think, in my view, there is two types of teams that are very effective. Sports teams and then in the military. I think these are like kind of, in my view, are some of the biggest, I think, examples of how teams can operate and function. So that's why we work with that coach. But that feeling good and feeling you belong and feeling that you're working on a bigger purpose, I think is very important. So the third element is really that sense of purpose. When I was talking about now as to, the work we do can really make the industry advance faster and progress faster. This is not only about our business, our P&L or DHL's business. It really set the tone to many other companies potentially. If you think about sustainability, if you think about the way we are working on improving packaging, as an example, these things matters way beyond our individual responsibilities. So I think this is some of the things that I'm definitely trying to convey and to have people get excited about.
That's amazing. I love the point on the coach and your reflection on which types of teams in our universe effectively are some of the best or operating in some of the best ways. That's really, really interesting. And I think it also gives us a little bit of insight into how you lead and kind of, as you said, how you view the world also. And just to shift gears ever so slightly, you talked a little bit about AI a little bit ago, and you talked about how, AI is the center of pretty much our universe right now, and how being in some capacity involved with AI can, potentially be what takes you to the next level in your career, or at least maybe future-proof or give you the growth, as you kind of talked about, within the industry that maybe someone is looking for. And so thinking about the future of work and the future of frontline workers, even more specifically, are there any trends that you are seeing or noticing, maybe even specifically in the logistics or supply chain space, that are kind of hitting the ground running that maybe some listeners might not even be aware of?
So, I mean, in terms of trends, if I go deep into the industry, I think most of these trends might be maybe a bit more technical for the audience, but we continue to see technology really being at the center of every disruption we see right now. I think there is, we identify trends in two dimensions. One is technological advancement, and the other one is social changes. Why they are important? Because if you have only one of the two, I'll give you an example. technologies of drones for deliveries have been very slow for adoption. It is more of a social reason than it is a technological reason. The same is happening for autonomous vehicles. Technologically, I think it has progressed pretty well, but there is still a very big advancement that needs to be done from social acceptance and regulation and so on. And people always put it on the back of regulation, but regulation are a result of social acceptance. Because the people that take decisions, they are people. And so I think it's important to look at this in these two ways. But if we think about like I think the biggest trend that I see right now is really like people are all across all organizations trying to figure out how do they adopt AI beyond the use of consumer application like ChatGPT. Or Suno if you're doing music or whatever gadget or tool you might be using to produce music or to produce content or to do research and so on. There is another obviously entire horizon of application in the enterprise space that we are very, very early on into the journey, very, very early on. And some people might argue this with me, but I always go back to one example is if you think you, Traci, as a consumer, and the way you've been buying products or you've been consuming services from the companies you buy stuff from, if you can give me more than 5 examples of how your life has meaningfully improved as a result of AI adoption in large enterprise, I would love to hear that, because nobody can give you 5 examples of how their life has improved as a result of AI being deployed in the companies that they buy stuff from. You call American Airlines, nothing against American Airlines. You call Delta, you try to resolve a problem with a retailer. It's more or less the same thing than 5 years ago. No major, they will come. For sure, they will come, and they will come in a meaningful way. But I think it's still going to take a bit of time because in enterprise, it takes more time than, a consumer application for obvious reasons. But I think the biggest trend that I see right now is really how do companies are looking at adopting this across their business. For us, for workforce management, for operation, it shows in different ways. It shows in robotics and software application across the warehouse. It shows on how do you improve employee engagement and how do you improve the conditions of the people working in the warehouses. How do they collaborate with some of these newer technologies as well? So there's like a wide range of topics, but it does show as one of the top priority that you have to adopt AI into the business. Where do you adopt it? What's the right use cases? And how do you train? We don't talk a lot about this, but also how do you train and how do you upskill your people towards being able to go through that change as well? It's a big topic.
Yeah, change management is the single hardest thing, I think, for anyone at any level and probably every organization to actually successfully achieve when, to your point, there is new technology or something to roll out. And maybe it's not even new technology. Maybe it's like a new policy or something. And change management is usually, it's either like the single point of failure or it's like the one thing that determines the success of that thing. So I really appreciate the insight that you've shared. And as you were saying, like, name 5 things, I'm like, yeah, I totally cannot. Like, thank goodness this is a rhetorical question, because there really aren't 5 things that we can name that larger enterprise has impacted us positively or otherwise, I suppose, with their adaptation of AI and within their business. But it'll be interesting to maybe one day reflect on this conversation and see, can we name those 5 things in a year, 2, 5, 10 years, right? We'll get there.
It will for sure. I mean, no doubt. I'm not skeptical of the technology at all. I am just suggesting it does take more time. And that's why I was really reflecting on the fact that companies right now, the big trend is how do you adopt it really on the enterprise level?
It's a big question. And, I am certainly not a technical person, but I imagine that with big questions, there are big obstacles to overcome in order to answer that question. And so, Nabil, I have only a couple more questions for you. And these closing questions are ones that I will ask every single person on this podcast. So again, Thanks for being so willing to be in the hot seat here. And all of the insights and all of the ideas that you've shared have been so wonderful. And so I want to continue by asking, what is the best advice you've ever received and that you continue to live by?
Walk the talk, I think, is the best one.
So do is exactly as you say you're going to do.
Yes. I mean, I like to, you ask only for one, but the combination, I think, of walk the talk and lead by example,
Yeah.
I think are two very important advice that I got very early on. And I think they are fundamental to the way I lead and also the way I behave in the business. I think particularly when you have organizations that are rather large, you at some point, if you are not conscious of that, you might disconnect yourself a bit from the business. And understanding that many of the outcome of whatever you work on ultimately depend on our teams that are in the warehouses, that are working around Thanksgiving and Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and are working at 11 p.m. at midnight and so on. If you disconnect from that, or if you're not able to do that yourself, then you already have a problem, in my view. So I think these are things that I've adopted very early on, and I live by.
Yeah, I love that. The idea of leading by example, walking the talk, all of those things, I think do set leaders apart from those who don't necessarily live by those mantras, so to speak. So thank you for sharing that. And my final question for you officially, and then you can go on with your day and you can say, whew, I did it. We talked about it. We're done. This question for you is, where can people follow your work and connect with you? So it was a trick question. It's not so intense. It's actually quite light for you this last time.
Yeah, no, it's definitely light, and it was a pleasure. Thank you, Traci. No, it was definitely an easy and great conversation. Easy, I think LinkedIn is definitely the best way. I mean, my contacts are also there. My email for the audience is my first name dot my last name @dhl.com. I'm pretty open also around that, and if people want to connect, they can certainly reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I usually respond, except when it's sales emails, they get filtered out. So otherwise, if people are genuine about engaging, I'll respond, and I'll respond myself.
Amazing. Well, Nabil, thank you so much. And like I said, I think we learned so much about you and the way that you view the world and your own leadership position. And certainly there are a lot of things that I think you should celebrate about the way that you lead teams. And it sounds like an awesome place to be, not only in your career, but also when on your team. So again, thank you so much. And we'll for sure have links for everyone in the show notes so that they can easily get connected. And so for all the listeners out there, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're catching this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you're watching on YouTube, maybe it's not to subscribe, but it is to follow. Whatever you got to do, we invite you to come back for our next episode. Nabil, thank you so much.
Thank you, Traci. Thank you to the Legion team. Cheers.